Ben, how do you end the war?
Number one, you put pressure on them to actually go to the table and have a real peace conversation and see if they can get a deal done. They've not tried
how
that
much
yet.
of the land? How much? Okay, but how much of the land, Ben, that Vladimir Putin has stolen by murdering a lot of people? How much of that land would you allow him to keep as part of that peace deal?
If I'm advising Ukraine in my deal, I'd say none of it if I'm Ukraine.
But that's their position.
I also know that we don't make it the United States of America either. So there is a ideal and then there's reality. I don't know what the reality looks like when Zelensky sits down at the table. What I do know is it is dumb for us to have a foreign policy that is indefinite stalemate against two different countries and everybody in between is getting rich.
Okay,
that's not a foreign policy.
So in this video, Ben Ferguson is pretty much fighting a 3-on-1 battle against Piers Morgan, some guy named Jake Bro, and Roland Martin. And I had a realization. These Democrats really don't care about what's best for America or Americans. Their only interest is to not get canceled by the Democratic Party and the people that serve them, right? They have such a hard time answering a simple question, even ones from Piers Morgan. Every time they do answer a question, it's a deflection about Trump this, Republicans that. The only part that I really agree with, that our leaders in Washington that we elect should be doing more work to serve the people to make the Americans' lives better, rather than attacking Trump, trying to get Democrats to register as Republicans so that they could elect Nikki Haley in the primaries over Donald Trump, have him locked up, all the crazy charges that are truly a reach. I mean, they compounded multiple misdemeanors beyond the statute of limitations into 34 felony accounts. They tried to charge him for having classified documents by an appointed Jack Smith that wasn't even elected, when Trump in reality has the power to classify and declassify just by speaking the words. These people, our elected leaders, should definitely be spending their time serving the American people to make our lives better. They should be securing the border. They should be working on lowering interest rates. They need to be making it to where young people have the opportunity to have a family, buy a house, and not have to work 90 hours a week to make that happen. But one thing has become crystal clear. When Joe Biden comes out and says that we need to calm down the rhetoric, he's talking about the people on the Republican side. And the Democratic pundits have got the message. And they certainly haven't changed a bit. They're not trying to listen to the other side. They're not trying to come to equal grounds where we can at least hear each other out and agree to disagree. They just want to get Trump and blame Republicans, blame MAGA for everything that's happened and take no accountability. And they certainly don't seem to be changing their approach one bit when it comes to trying to win this election. They want you to vote against Donald Trump and not for Joe Biden, because they can't win on policies. So let's get into the video. If you enjoy content like this, make sure you do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel along the way, and let's roll.
Ben Ferguson, talking to Mehdi there, it's quite similar in a way to my conversations with people like Destiny in the last sort of 3 days, where they are incapable of addressing any potential contribution by anybody on the left in terms of violent, incendiary language. For example, comparing Trump to Hitler, saying he should be in the bullseye and so on and so on, without immediately deflecting to the right, who I believe also have a lot of things to answer for in terms of the language they use, including Donald Trump. What is your view of what Mehdi's argument was there?
I think it's sad that after you have a moment where Donald Trump was almost murdered in front of the world, that you had that much bullshit from a partisan who doesn't care if a former president of the United States of America is assassinated. I sat there and I watched that. I saw no compassion for this country. I saw no compassion for Donald Trump. I saw no compassion for the people that were actually killed in that shooting. And I go back to what I've said for several days now. There are a lot of people on the left that have Trump derangement syndrome, is the kindest way I can put it, where they wanted the president to die. And you saw it on social media. You saw it on stage with Jack Black. You've seen this in the Democratic culture now for since 2016. They have called him Hitler for years. The president has put out in 13 tweets, which I read on my show yesterday, that he is a threat to our democracy and a literal threat to our country. if you go out and you say that every day, and if you are Joe Biden and you're the leader of the United States of America, and you don't go out there and say to the American people, we need to take a step back. We have gone too far. And we need to come together and understand that political violence, and I have said things that I probably shouldn't have said. Um, that's not leadership. It's just not. I have toned down my rhetoric because it's important. And if you don't understand that you almost had a dead former president, by the grace of God, it got his ear instead of his brain, and you come on national TV, and the only thing you want to do is attack Republicans with whataboutism. I'll use his words. It's a lot of sad bullshit, and we should be better than this as human beings. I've said this for a long time. I never want there to be harm on anyone who is a leader of a country, especially my country. Joe Biden, damn it, is my president. I want Joe Biden to be safe. I want Joe Biden to be protected. I want Joe Biden's family to be safe because they are my first family. I say the same thing for Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton. There is no place for this. And the fact that they can't even understand that after what happened on Saturday, that you need to tone it down and really look at your heart and realize how close we came to burying a former president because of the obsession with Orange Man bad and Donald Trump should be in jail. Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler. Words matter. And leaders, by the way, Piers, and I'll end with this. Leaders, true leaders, okay, they understand that words matter. And they understand as a leader, whether you're Republican or Democrat, that words matter. And what I saw from your last guest was, I think, sad. I think it's sad commentary on the state of affairs in the Democratic Party. I don't believe, by the way, the Democratic Party is real anymore. I believe they're Marxists, socialists, and communists who have no problem taking out their political opponents by bankrupting them, throwing them in jail, or even killing them.
Okay.
And Roland, you can laugh, but the president of the United States of America got shot, and for you to laugh, I think it's sad and it's bullshit.
No. It is sad, and Ben Ferguson is right. The actions, which is what we can judge, the actions of the Democratic Party over the last 8 years against Donald Trump and Donald Trump supporters has been nothing less than what he just described. But instead, he's going to shake his head and do the Democrat thing, and a Republican said something, so I got to fight against it. And it's sad because that is the state of affairs from the Democratic Party, regardless of the people that are hurt in their wake.
All right, well, let me bring in Roland Martin, who was laughing there. Why were you laughing there, Roland?
Well, it's total bullshit, Ben. And I'm laughing because you just sat here with this whole, we need to step back, we need to watch what we say. And then it's like, oh, they're Marxists and they're communists. That's what I was laughing at because that was insane. You said what the president needs to do, he did.
3 questions.
No, Ben.
I'm going to back it up.
Ben,
You're gonna,
no,
Roland,
I'm going to
Roland,
finish.
answer it. It's a simple
Ben,
question, Roland. It's a
I'm
simple
going to
question.
All right,
finish.
Ben, let him respond
Ben,
first.
I'm going to finish. I had to sit here and listen to an insane, ridiculous, nonsensical discussion for 40 minutes. This back and forth, this back and forth, this back and forth. Nothing about policy, nothing about what's actually happening, but the back and forth. Here's the reality. President Biden came out shortly after the assassination attempt and spoke to the nation. He spoke to the nation in the Oval Office. He's addressed this in an interview with Lester Holt. The reality is nobody, I don't care who you are, should be pleased with the assassination attempt on any American politician, whether it was Donald Trump, whether it was Gabby Giffords, whether it was Reagan or Ford or any other president. I don't care who you are. So all this back and forth is just dumb. Now, are there political differences? Are they ideological differences? Can we have that actual debate? Yes. Can we do that? But what is ridiculous is when it's, oh, let's take a pause, and it's like, yeah, they're Marxists and then they're communists. That, Ben, is complete nonsense.
But let me ask you, Roland. All right,
so
let me ask Roland. Let me ask you. Right, hang on, Ben. Hang on, Ben. Roland, let me ask you the question that look. There was a lot of back and forth with Mehdi because I believe that Mehdi constantly was deflecting from wanting to accept that anyone on the left has ever done or said inflammatory, incendiary things. When obviously they have. Do you believe it is unhelpful to public discourse in America that people keep calling Trump the new Hitler?
People call him Trump and Hitler. Republicans did. It was unhelpful. What's unhelpful is when we do not have policy conversations. That is unhelpful.
But why can't you just answer that question? Why is it so hard to answer?
Actually talk about what the actual issue is. That to me is silly. And then when you spend 40 minutes on just that one question versus what are the
but you won't answer it either. This question can be answered very quickly and we move on.
I answered it.
What
I answered it.
Do you believe? Hang on, Roland. What was your? I missed it. What was your answer?
How did you miss it?
Should people call Trump the new Hitler? Yes or no?
People shouldn't call Trump the new Hitler.
Okay.
If he quotes Hitler, quote him.
Okay, good. So he's not the new Hitler. It's wrong to do that. It's inflammatory and wrong. Yeah.
Do I believe he's dangerous? Yes.
No, that's not the question.
No. See, again, Piers.
It's not the question.
No, Piers. This is the
It
problem.
should be very straightforward.
No, Piers. You asked
Roland,
the question.
is he the new Hitler? No. Should people stop calling him the new Hitler? Yes.
I've already answered it.
So people should stop calling him Hitler.
Okay. We're going to call him Trump. What's the next question, Piers?
I'll come to the next question now that you've answered.
Fine. After about 50 minutes. Great.
Now, the reason why he's so triggered right there is because it is physically painful to actually answer that question, and he's feeling it.
Fine. Yeah, but you know what? If Mehdi Hassan had answered that question like you did, it would have taken 2 minutes.
It's a waste of a conversation.
Actually, it's not. I actually think one of the it's actually not, because the only way, because when a president of the United States, who was president until 3.5 years ago, who may well be president again come November, when he is nearly assassinated, and it is widely accepted by everyone in American public discourse that the rhetoric used on both sides now for a long period of time has got completely out of hand and may well, we don't know, but may well have played a part in influencing someone to try and put a bullet in his brain. I think it's a legitimate debate.
We have no idea what the motive was.
No.
We have no idea. None of this. Literally, none of this. We're making assumptions. And what I'm saying is, that's nuts.
It's not nuts. The shooter was 20 years old, and for the last 8 years, all he's heard since he was 12 years old is that Trump is Hitler, Trump is a Nazi, MAGA supporters are fascists, and all this other stuff. And it's not illogical to draw a conclusion that he was influenced. And until they prove otherwise, I don't care if he was a registered Republican. The fact is, it was only 6 months ago that the Democratic Party was telling Democrats to go register as Republicans so that they could vote for Nikki Haley in the primaries, so that they could get Trump that way. They wanted to try to beat him in the primaries and use Nikki Haley. But the problem with that plan was the fact that people like me and a lot of others saw through the veil and realized that Nikki Haley was serving the Democratic Party. She started being called a Democrat, and that plan failed rather quickly. And that 20-year-old, even though he was registered as a Republican, he did give $15 to Joe Biden. Yeah, it's only $15, but what's the saying? You put your money where your mouth is. You know, that $15 spoke a lot more to me than the fact that he was registered as a Republican. And the simple fact remains that even though he's registered as a Republican, that kid can still go and vote down ticket as a Democrat. Not only that, but that 20-year-old has never even had the opportunity to vote in a presidential election. Only actions that we can judge him by is the fact that he took a shot at President Trump, killed a firefighter, and critically injured 2 other people.
Okay, but do you accept, finally, before I move on to the other 2 panelists, finally, Roland, do you accept that it's actually legitimate to say that everyone should dial down the rhetoric?
It is legitimate for people to have policy discussions.
That's not my question.
It is nonsensical when people talk about violence.
Right.
I subscribe to the same position as Dr. King, as Reverend Dr. Jim Lawson, when it comes to the issue of nonviolence.
The amount of corruption in Ukraine.
You're spreading Russian propaganda.
Let me finish and shut up and just let me finish. And then you can say it's propaganda, which is the line that you guys on the left use. I'm fine with it. I know what you're going to say. You have no idea what I'm going to say. The amount of corruption that the world has already proven that the money that's gone into Ukraine, that has been siphoned off by oligarchs and others, that has disappeared that was supposed to go to the war efforts that is not is significant.
80% of the funds stay here in the United States.
We should have accountability.
But Ben,
80% of the allocated funds have entirely stayed in the United States. They go to U.S. defense companies.
Ben, as Jake is saying,
No, but
the vast
if it's
majority
being
of that
stolen,
money
it's
has
being
never left
stolen
the
by
US.
our own companies.
It's never left the US,
Again,
most of the money.
I will go back. I'll answer that question, Piers. I don't think just because the money stays and makes some people rich in the U.S. that's a good foreign policy.
No, but let me ask you this.
Again,
Look, before I get to Roland, I want to get to
Iraq,
Roland to get his response to this. But Ben, the final question is, the natural logical conclusion of your position on Ukraine is that Vladimir Putin wins. How can you be happy if he wins? Well, how else does it end? How else does it end?
I would say Zelensky better actually have a plan where he and his country are buying into a plan instead of a stalemate where it's like, I need another 30
what is
billion,
the plan?
another 6 billion, another 120 billion, and this thing goes on.
How do you end the war, Ben?
We've already had a 10-year war in Afghanistan.
How do you end the war?
And it's faster for the people.
So for me, who's an America First American citizen, I don't really care how they end the war. But what do you mean, Pierce? How do you end the war? When did it become the United States' responsibility to end the war between Russia and Ukraine? Russia started it without our permission, and we've given Ukraine hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equipment and money, and the fact that they say 80% of that stayed in the United States doesn't matter to me because it's funding the military-industrial complex and it's continuing a war that is killing people. How they end that war is between Russia and Ukraine. And the only resolution that I can come up with is electing Trump and allowing him to fulfill his promise. He says he's going to have it done. Let's elect him. Let's see what he can do.
Ben, how do you end the war?
Number one, you put pressure on them to actually go to the table and have a real peace conversation and see if they can get a deal done. They've not tried that yet.
How much of the land? How much of the land, Ben, that Vladimir Putin has stolen by murdering a lot of people? How much of that land would you allow him to keep as part of that peace deal?
If I'm advising Ukraine in my deal, I'd say none of it. If I'm Ukraine,
but that's their position.
I also know that we don't make it the United States of America either. So there is a ideal and then there's reality. I don't know what the reality looks like when Zelensky sits down at the table. What I do know is it is dumb for us to have a foreign policy that is indefinite stalemate against two different countries and everybody in between is getting rich.
Okay,
that's not a foreign policy.
Let me come.
We did it in Afghanistan.
Let me come to Roland. Roland, your response to this?
Look, Trump lauds Putin. When Trump says, I can end this war quickly, are you serious? Let's just be clear. The Republican Party, folks like Ben, they are following Donald Trump down the plank. The fact of the matter is, you as a NATO alliance.
As a NATO alliance, Ukraine is not a part of NATO. What is he talking about?
You must understand, Ben, you talked a whole lot. You talked a whole lot. I didn't say a word. Well, the reality is when you have a NATO alliance, it is going to cost America a hell of a lot more if Putin succeeds in Ben, I did not interrupt you. It's going to cost America a lot more if Putin takes over Ukraine. It's going to cost America a lot more money and a lot more lives. We should be standing with Ukraine. But what we should not be doing, as the other guest said, is do the bidding of Russia, presenting Russia disinformation as somehow, oh my God, massive amounts of corruption, when we all know 80% of the money, I am not finished, 80% of the money is going to American companies in every congressional district. So can we please stop with this nonsense and understand that we are supposed to stand with our allies?
Once again, Ukraine is not a part of NATO. They are not an ally of the United States. There's nothing that Ukraine has that helps Americans' lives get better. Right now, they're just taking and taking and taking from us. That is war machine propaganda to assume that Putin and Russia are going to continue to try to conquer other lands. They like to use the phrase Russian propaganda, but Nobody over here that's America first is trying to look out for Russia. They're trying to look out for Americans because what we have on the line is a potential nuclear World War III between two superpowers. And with Russia being a part of the BRICS alliances that is partnered with China, it's not so far-fetched to imagine that China would then be the third superpower involved in that war. And we don't want it. So for the sake of protecting lives, Ukrainian lives, Russian lives, American lives, Chinese lives, let's elect Donald Trump and let him fulfill his promise. Because what's going on right now isn't working. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.